for LA cases.
I got you. I'm pushing us live now.
Okay.
Hey
Excellent.
guys, I want to welcome everybody. This is obviously Bernard Nomberg, Nomberg Law Live. We come to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central and a very early 8 a.m. Pacific time for my friend Eric Anderson. It's so good to see you, bud. How you
It's
doing?
my pleasure. I'm doing great, Bernard. Great. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, and I've really been looking forward to our conversation today. Guys, I want to give you just a brief resume on Eric, which is, it may take us a little while, but what a multifaceted, interesting guy. Former school teacher,
Yeah.
former prosecutor, former sports coach, former professional wrestler, Wrestling Hall of Fame in New England. Let's see, a cigar aficionado, and so much more. We got so many great things. And if you haven't caught his YouTube series, Wrestling with the Law, I highly recommend that you do so. And several people have asked me, what is, and how, was this a typo? Did you mean to put Eric Anderson Sin Law or Sin Lawyer in your promos? And the answer is yes, I meant to. And I'm going to let Eric explain it in a minute. But Eric, for anything that I didn't briefly touch upon, tell folks more about yourself and your practice.
Well, let's see. You've covered a good chunk of it. I mean, there are other things I used to do. I used to do stand-up comedy, but as I always joke, once I left teaching, I lost my material. So the law would certainly give me a lot more material now. I just don't have the time for it. I was an actor for a bit as well. Part of that is, when you grow up in Southern California, sooner or later you wind up in the entertainment business one way or another. The sin lawyer aspect came because we have part of our practice is representing those things which may be thought of as sinful, but are still legal. So for example, cannabis, obviously, alcohol, we've represented breweries, distilleries, also as well, adult entertainment. And also along with that is tobacco shops. I don't do cigarettes, so I don't represent any cigarette companies or anything like that, but cigar lounges, cigar importers, cigar manufacturers, businesses that revolve around those things. I also get, because that's actually what got me into the civil side and the business side of law was my love of alcohol and tobacco. Before that, I was a criminal guy. I was a trial lawyer. That's all I cared about. So that's what made the shift. And actually, what made me go into call it sin law was I kept seeing these advertisements for these people who advertise themselves as Christian lawyers. And I should probably give the warning, and I know that a lot of your fan base out there is obviously down in Alabama, the buckle of the Bible Belt, if you will. So I'm going to give them the warning about what's going to come next. But the minute I start to hear Christian lawyer, my immediate thought is to instantly grab for my pocket and hold my wallet. Because I just think the marketing for it sometimes can be a little questionable. And I thought, wait a minute, what if I went in the other direction? Instead of talking about how holy we are, my view is going to be, no, we're not holy at all. That's not our gig. So I went ahead and started marking it as, with sin law and sin lawyers, and then trademarked them. So now we are the only sin lawyers in the country.
Well, I think it's such a genius marketing plan. And before we get too much further, I want to welcome two of our buddies, Mitch Jackson in Southern California and Daniel Jaffe in Toronto. And we're all four part of some online lawyer organizations. We meet up virtually weekly and have just some outstanding discussions. And to the three of you guys, I can tell you, you've not only enriched my practice in the last few years, but also my life, because I consider you guys friends. I truly enjoy the conversations, and I get upset with myself when I can't on our Tuesday afternoon calls. If I can't quite make it, I always go back and watch, but I always enjoy the camaraderie and the fellowship. So thank you to all three of you guys. And another buddy, Nancy Maryland, has just joined us from Indianapolis. Good morning, Nancy. Of course, guys, I'm talking with Eric Anderson, sin law, sin lawyer, wrestler, and so much more. Eric, back in the day when you were in Massachusetts, I know that you worked in the prosecutor's office, among other things. And I know from many other friends who started out in the district attorney's office or prosecuting cases. Then they go into private practice. Take us a little bit into your journey. What led you, first of all, to go into the district attorney's office, and then ultimately now you're on the other side of those cases out in California?
Well, truth be told, I didn't care at the time whether I was going to be in the prosecutor or the DA's office or the public defender's office, to be honest with you. What I wanted to do was try cases. That to me was the most important thing. My entire life from the time I was 6 years old was geared toward becoming a trial lawyer. That's, to me, everything. I only went to college because I needed to do that to get into law school. I went to law school, and I'm very pleased with where I chose to go to law school. Boston College was a great, wonderful experience because I needed that to become a lawyer, and I needed to become a lawyer to be a trial lawyer. And so it turned out that I had done a clinic at the Middlesex DA's office, and then that's where I wound up going after law school. I thought it was great. It's one of the best experiences anybody can ever have.
Well, I know, for example, they used to, I don't know if they still do, in Alabama, you can get your third year law license, so to speak. It's a card, virtually a card, that you're under the supervision of a lawyer or lawyers who are part of the bar. And for example, I took a class my third year of law school with the district attorney's office in the next county over. And I was immediately thrown into district court, and we were trying cases right there in front of the judge. And you're right, there's nothing better than that experience. You can watch all you want, but until you get thrown in, and it's just like wrestling or any other sport or any other thing in life until you get that real world experience. But Eric, I want to back up even further.
Yeah.
What led to you wanting to become a trial lawyer at such a young age? Did you have family members or friends, neighbors who were lawyers, or what was that influence from?
Well, actually, it's a TV show. It was Good Times. I was a child, and I was watching the show Good Times. Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, that was a show that was a big hit in the 70s. And it was very important because in the 70s was really the first time you're seeing not necessarily a plethora, but a lot of shows with black leads, mm-hmm. and that were telling black stories. That was brand new. Now, I was still young enough to where I didn't know any different, but I knew from the family room it was a big deal. And Good Times was about a family that was growing up in the projects in Chicago, and my family was never that poor, not. But I did live in a neighborhood that some people may have thought of as a little rough, though it didn't seem that way to me at all. But Michael was the youngest character. Michael Evans was talking, and he said that he was discussing growing up to be a lawyer like Thurgood Marshall. And I asked my mother, "Who's Thurgood Marshall?" And my mother gave the same answer she always does: "Let's go look it up." Mm-hmm. Now, later on, I would, of course, discover that my mother knew exactly who Thurgood Marshall was. Mm-hmm. But her answer to everything was, "Let's go look it up." And in our house, in what would eventually become my bedroom, was a big bookcase. My daddy had gone ahead and created a bookcase right over the fireplace that covered the whole wall. Mm-hmm. So we had this giant library in that room. And I went, looked him up, saw Thurgood Marshall. I looked at my mother. I said, "He did all this?" She said, "Yes." "He was a lawyer?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I want to be a lawyer." And so that's when I decided to be a lawyer. Now, of course, Marshall would be more famous as an appellate lawyer and jurist. And I discovered that my skills were better tuned to being a trial lawyer than they were to the appellate side. And so that's kind of how I got into it.
I was always scared of Mr. Evans. Oh man, and I knew some dads like that in my hometown in South Alabama. But you're right, Michael was the big dreamer. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Dynamite, JJ, and Thelma, and that was such a wonderful show. But you're right, Michael had all the big dreams. But man, that's an awesome story. What an influence! You never know what resonates with you.
There are two people who I'm always hoping to meet. One is Blair Underwood, mm-hmm. who was one of the stars on LA Law back in the day. Yeah. And who apparently in the last 35 years has aged like 5 years. Just drives me crazy how much he has not aged. And the other is Ralph Carter, who played Michael Evans, because their roles were very important. And that's one of the reasons why we talk about representation matters. Mm-hmm. Because seeing that for me, because there weren't any black lawyers in my neighborhood, and I didn't know any. So that was, for me, became the goal and the spark And just being able to let them know I'm where I am because you did what you did.
How cool. How cool. All right, I want to take it inside the ring now.
Yeah, yeah.
You were an athlete growing up, obviously. Where did that come from? Where did the wrestling origin start?
Well, let's see. When I was young, I was very much exposed to a lot of different forms of wrestling. Oddly enough, roller derby was a bigger interest for me than wrestling was. But I'd gotten done playing Pop Warner football one day. This person came up to about four of us and said, "Hey, would you guys like to learn how to wrestle?" And our first thought was, "What, you mean those guys rolling around on the mat in their underwear?" I said, "Nothing." Then he, explained a little more. I said, "No, we'll try it out." So go to this ring, and for some reason, I just fell in love with it. And then I started getting more involved in wrestling, watching over the years. And so I got exposed to everything. I got exposed to the incredible British wrestlers, the wrestlers in Mexico, the wrestlers in Japan, the different areas. Like, for example, in the old territories, in Alabama, you guys had what was the Southeastern Territory, Continental Wrestling. And you recently lost, actually, one of the biggest stars you ever had there, Bullet Bob Armstrong, just passed away. And it was just, and traveling a lot because I had a lot of Southern relatives. I got to see I always tell people, I saw Jerry Lawler when Jerry Lawler was Jerry Lawler.
Right.
And if people didn't understand, I'm like, yeah, if all you saw was the WWE King and puppies, you saw an entertaining Jerry Lawler, but you didn't see the Jerry Lawler.
Did you come through Memphis to his territory, or where?
Oh God! Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't work that territory because when I finally got old enough to really hit the circuits, I was doing mostly what they called outlaws because the territories themselves were starting to die down. But I got to, during the training before I ever broke in, I got to see and go to a variety of these places and see the different, like there's a different atmosphere in Dallas than there was in Houston. And there's a different way of wrestling in Minnesota than you saw in St. Louis. And there's a different one in the Northeast, with the WWF than you saw in Florida. And watching those divergent styles was really impressive to me. So I think it was the mixture of sport and theater that drew me to it.
Well, I got a name for you. He's a good bit older than both of us, but you may have come across him back in the day in the South. The Great Kaiser, Sam Tenenbaum.
Yeah, yeah.
Sam is a good friend of mine, lives here in Birmingham, still sings opera, and he's been on this show before. His stories are phenomenal. And guys, if you didn't ever see Sam, he was masked, but his leopard print outfits was what he was known for. Big, tall guy, and just some phenomenal stories, and a heck of an athlete. Even at his age, I think he's pushing close to 80 now.
He would have to be, yeah.
Still works out every single day. Phenomenal guy.
That was one of the great things about wrestling, was that you would when you got the chance to travel with guys who'd been on the circuit for a while, one of the best ways of learning was that you would be in a car with them and they would start to talk, and you would get not only these great stories, but they would explain to you how everything worked. In wrestling, we have a term called psychology. And it's no different than the psychology you'll have in a trial, in that when do you do what you need to do? When do you know? As we all know, sometimes the question isn't putting in all the evidence, it's what evidence do you want to put in and when do you want to put it in? When is there something that may be good for you and good for your client, but it's not going to play well with the jury, so you hold back on it? When I first started, for example, everybody I cross-examined was, I'm just beating the daylights out of them. And the comparison I would make is that the ring bell starts, and the first thing we do is I'm wrestling someone I've never wrestled before, and the first thing we start doing is trading punches. Okay, well, that doesn't tell a story. That doesn't get anywhere. You don't need to do it. And so I learned how to change from to everybody to knowing when there's a time when you've got permission from the jury to now beat up on the witness. The difference with the death by 1,000 cuts, which you learn. So that same kind of way of sitting, and that's why one of my favorite things with lawyers is sitting down with lawyers, and people think we're just trading war stories, but we're learning. That's what's happening. We're learning. That's the thing. I still love listening to guys who've been doing this for 40 years because they've got great, incredible stories. And now that I'm at the 20-year mark, I love the storytelling as we go down, through the years with everybody else and talking. It's the camaraderie that I think is great. It's the thing about wrestling I miss. I miss the camaraderie.
Oh, absolutely. And I got a comment from Mitch. He says he knows Blair Underwood's agent and may be able to make an introduction.
Oh, I would love him forever if he did that.
Yeah, that would be great. I want to welcome Saul Gruber, who just joined us. Hey, Saul.
Big Saul.
good to see you. Thank you for joining in.
Mhm.
Guys, of course, I'm talking with Eric Anderson out of California. We're all over the board here, but some great conversation. You actually led me to my next topic, was some parallels of what you learned from your days as a wrestler and how you took that into your practice of law. And one of the things I just heard from you, it's reading the room, it's reading the audience, whether you're in the ring or in the courtroom. I'm sure there's a lot of parallels there
Yeah.
that you probably use every day.
Oh yeah, I've often said everything in life I ever needed to learn, I learned in pro wrestling. Everything, everything I need to learn, I learned there. And for example, when I broke in, one of the things was you may know a couple of what you called spots in the match, and you would know the finish of a match, but everything else was improvised. So a lot of times people say, "Oh, it's so choreographed," and a lot of what you see now is a lot more choreographed than we had in our day. You know, a lot more people planned the match from the beginning all the way to the end. When I was breaking in, that wasn't what was done. And so during a match, you would have to kind of get a feel as to what's going with the audience, where's it going, where are you working. Like now, sometimes you'll hear, if people hear fans go boring, they'll switch up and go to a high spot. But you learn from the veterans that they say boring. It's like, no. We're going at our pace. Right. We're going to bring them along. Mm-hmm. Don't let them control this match. You control it. And part of what you learn in a trial is when not to get off your game, when to figure out, okay, this is where we're going to make our move. You're paying attention to the little things. I think one thing that I really took appreciation was a judge said that I do the best voir dire he's ever seen. And I think part of that is just because I know when I'm asking the question, we all know, sometimes I'm not asking the question to this juror for this juror. That follow-up question isn't for that juror. That follow-up question is for everybody else, because I want to see everybody else's reaction. The other thing is that with wrestling, you're used to theater in the round because you're surrounded by all sides. So you get very good at being able to look one way and know what's happening over here. Mm-hmm. Now, the same thing happened in teaching. You can talk to a student here and you know that there's that student over there in the corner that's doing something they shouldn't. And that, I think, helps start to get the feel for, okay, where are they going? What are we going to do with it? Mm-hmm. The other thing is that one of my wrestling trainers, the legendary Dr. Billy Graham, had said the show starts when you wake up. And one of the things you learn as a lawyer is you've got to put that show on the minute you arrive. So, because jurors will pay attention to everything. So it's important, for example, does your client have children? If they do, and if your client is accused of a crime, don't be afraid to have the children there if your client can interact well with the children. Because during those breaks, when they see that, now they see a human being. Mm-hmm. Now they see a person. Now they see a father. Now there's a different story, and you haven't had to tell it, but they're seeing it.
It's oftentimes, it's not what's said in court that's as important. It's what's seen in court, just like what you're referring to. And for the non-lawyers out there who don't know what voir dire is, it's the process of the attorneys quizzing and asking questions of all the potential jurors out there who may potentially sit on the jury. And they get, both sides of the case get to ask questions to kind of start weeding out the process, if you will, who will make a good juror or not. Now, Eric, I wanted to ask you, still in the wrestling part of this, mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about some of the names or monikers that you've gone over. I know one was Ebony Blade. Yeah. Tell us some of the history of the origin of Ebony Blade.
Well, actually, the very first wrestling character I had was my own name, Eric Anderson. Mm-hmm. Then when I was doing Lucha, I was the first Gemini Kid, which Vandal Drummond, a great local luchador here in California, came up with. I think we came up with it together. We were driving along and we came up with it. Ebony Blade was a little different because what happened was, first it was Rick Darnell, because I thought Eric was just too plain, so I didn't want to do that. And I was a huge Ric Flair fan, so it made sense. And Darnell's my middle name, so I was like, yeah, that's got some style to it. But then it was just Rick Darnell. I said, wait a minute. And then I remembered a line from Mallory's Mote Arthur, the Death of Arthur, in which there's advice given to a knight that says, you must strike like yon ebony blade, swiftly, brutally, mercilessly. And that's when I said, that's it. So we started with Rick Darnell, the Ebony Blade. And then what happened was people just stopped saying Rick Darnell and started saying the Ebony Blade. Then the dropped off, and it just became, before I knew it, it was Ebony Blade. So that's when, and then when we added the son of a preacher man gimmick aspect, that was it. That's when things for that character really took off.
Well, I was going to ask you, what was your family's response, or what was your family's when you were first getting into professional wrestling? How did they take it? What did they think?
It's fair to say my mother was not a fan. She was not a fan. She thought it was ridiculous. She thought it was phony. The other thing was that she also thought that as she was an educator. And so my mom grew up in the segregated South, in Louisiana. It's one reason why when people say, oh, that's such a long time ago, I'm like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't long ago at all. She only died, 4 years ago. Okay. So she was not a fan. But she also never forbade me from doing it. Mm-hmm. So she let me do it. And then I love telling this story. We were doing one show and my mother was in the audience. Only time she was ever at a wrestling show. Only time. Mm-hmm. And this guy is, he's beating the crap out of me on this point because it's what we call the heat. So he's putting the heat on me. He's the heel. He's beating the daylights out of me, all this. And then suddenly I hear it. I hear this. Don't hold me. Don't hold me. That's it. You sorry dog, you said just breaking the rules. He's breaking all the rules, referee. And out of the corner of my eye, I can see that my mom is now standing up and she's totally into this. But I also know that my mom knows that this is what we call a work. It's a performance. So she becomes a fan who's working and just throws in there. And so the guy I'm wrestling, Thunder Machine, he turns, looks, he says, I'm going to make sure you don't have any grandkids. She's like, you come on down here. I'll take you on. And she's swinging her purse and everything. She gets totally into it. She gets the crowd riled up into it because she's so into it, and then when I make my comeback, my mom's like, yeah, the Lord will smite you. The Lord will smite you. And my mom never went to another match again ever. But from that point on, she also never gave me any grief over it. She understood it now.
She should have been hired on the spot.
Oh, the guy who ran the show said I can get her work before I get you to work. Uh-huh. Oh, and I'm like, yeah, you probably could have. Yeah. But yeah, my mother was an amazingly talented woman. I mean this sincerely. Mm-hmm. She was a great piano player, played by ear. She was one of the greatest singers I've ever heard in my life. I mean, I would still put Aretha and Ella ahead of her. Mm-hmm. But I'd put her up there with Gladys Knight and Patti LaBelle. I really would. She was that good. But being a teacher and being a mother, the idea of traveling all over to do shows, she never would have done that. That wasn't for her. And she was an incredibly bright woman, had a great sense of humor, made reading important. That was probably one of the biggest lessons. And the other great thing she gave me was the two best sisters the world has ever seen. And she made it clear to us that it was us against the world. And so, she was special.
What gifts? What gifts. And guys, I'm talking with Eric Anderson out of California. I haven't met him in person, but we see each other almost every Tuesday.
Yeah,
in our Legal Minds group, and just have great camaraderie and conversations. And Eric, I'm loving these stories. This is just fantastic. Let's kind of pivot for just a minute or so. We're 7 months now into the pandemic.
Yeah.
Politics aside,
mm-hmm.
What has changed in the practice of law and how you represent people who are accused of misdemeanors or felonies or whatever it may be in California? Sure. How are you dealing with that?
It has not been easy, in part because, for one, with all due respect, the courts have screwed the pooch on this a lot. And I've got no problem calling out one court in particular. The Riverside County courts have just been terrible. I mean, if I have a case scheduled for the 3rd and then a judge sua sponte on the 2nd vacates the date and changes it, and then I get a notice about it on the 4th. So I'll show up on the 3rd and like, where's the case? Like, we have no idea where it is. And they've done this repeatedly. The problem as well has been, and I've spoken to some judges through our ends of court, and some of the judges are like, oh yeah, if you just check the website. And I look and I say, look, are you guys checking the website? Because I've got news for you. It's not getting updated as much as you think it is. Mm-hmm. It's just not. So the part of the difficulty in that regard was when cases were coming through and they stacked up because they for a couple of months they weren't doing anything in court. Everything was being moved. So we're stacked to the gills now. But one of the big problems was that you couldn't get in on court dates. The other thing were people who were in custody, and there was an emergency order that extended the time that you could, give them their preliminary hearings or trials. And our responses here in California, for most of the defense bar, has been, "I'm sorry, this is a constitutional issue, and I don't care what your emergency order is. You prosecuted them. You need to go ahead and fix this. You need to go ahead and give them their trial. It's not our job to give them their hearing and their trials. That's your job. You do it." And that's still kind of muddled as to what the solution is going to be. I know some have already started doing some trials in which they've got the jury scattered throughout the courtroom, which of course means now you have to do theater in the round, which of course for some lawyers might be new, but for some of us, it's old hat.
Well, I was going to ask you, are the courthouses open? Are they modifying how they're doing things?
Yes, there are more courthouses that are open than before. They're limiting who gets to come in. They're taking as many safety precautions, I think, as they can. In that regard, I think that they're doing fairly well. Like I said, things like noticing changing dates, that's terrible, and that's on them. They should have fixed that. But the things as far as the safety precautions go, I don't think there's much else they could have done better than what they've been doing. And it's taken a lot. And so I'm waiting to see how the rest is going to flesh out. Part of the change for our practice is we don't do in-person meetings anymore. All our meetings with all our clients, except for special occasions, are all being done online.
Well, I was going to ask you, if you have a client who is incarcerated, but you need an audience, how do you deal with that?
I go. If they're incarcerated, I go. Though admittedly, in many of their cases, their hearings are all being done via video. So especially the federal courts. The federal courts are almost all, at least from what I'm seeing here locally, all being done video. So
now, is that you at your office, the client at the jail, or
client at the jail, me at the office,
and then the court, obviously at the court or wherever they are virtually?
Yes. Yeah. I think one of the things that's become clear is we have a very poor record keeping system and notification system here in Cal. California is a state that, for those who can't fathom how big it really is, we have 58 counties. Now, of course, Texans will say, yeah, we've got 135 or whatever the number is there, which is probably way too many counties. But of those 58 counties, 9 of those counties are in Southern California. So, and of those 9, I think 3 of them are the largest county. Actually, all our large counties are here in Southern California. All the other counties are really small. But that also means that that's 58 different ways of doing something. And that's problematic. I think that one of the things I've learned, and I've been arguing for, is that California needs its own ECF system, just like they do with PACER at the federal level. Because really, why is it our responsibility to check the website every day to see what kind of changes you've made? No, you should be able to. You've put it in. A notice should immediately go to us, because that's what happens in the federal system. And the feds have been doing this now. They've had ECF and PACER for 20 years.
And for those of you who don't know, it's an online filing system and court system that allows all the parties involved in the case to be able to, in theory, go to the computer to see the most recent what's going on. Eric, I've got, this won't come as a shock to you. We have 67 or 68 counties in Alabama. Not nearly the population. We have less than 5 million people. But here's what's frustrating for us. And most of my practice is judge-based work comp practice. But even in the same courthouse, let's say we have 10 judges, 11 judges in our biggest courthouse, which is in Birmingham, where I am. Those judges aren't in uniform with certain procedures. So you have to know every particular judge's preference on what needs to be filed and time and how they want things done. Holy smokes, it takes a while. And when the new judge comes on, you never know what you're going to get.
We have a difference in different courthouses regarding just security. Some places you take off your belt, some places you don't. Some places they make a decision for lawyers, some they don't. You're like,
one of my few court appearances up in the north part of our state a couple of months ago now, I'm with my client, we're prepping outside, we walk inside, we go through security, and the client goes ahead of me and they do protocol where they did the thermometer, the temperature check and those things, and put him through the airport security, the what you call it, the metal detector.
Yeah.
And the security fella says to me, "Are you a lawyer?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "Just go on in."
Oh, good God.
Doesn't take my temperature, doesn't make me go through the security, but if you want it, but it's that way everywhere. Everybody's just trying to learn.
And that I think becomes part of the difficulty because, for example, in Riverside, if you have a particular card, the Riverside ID card, then you pass through faster than if you just have your bar license and your ID.
Right.
What I find funny is I look at the state bar and I'm thinking, why don't you just have our bar cards be, because you're already taking our fingerprints, right? Why don't we do picture IDs on our bar cards?
And guys, if you want to know some of the things we talk about in the lawyer groups, this is it.
Yeah, that's right.
We're just sharing common problems. It doesn't matter where you are in the country.
That's right.
Nancy says they have 92 counties in Indiana. And Dan asks, on a little more serious note, did your mom ever get to see you in court?
My mother heard me in court twice.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, I spent most of the early part of my career was in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And she did see once I was on television there. And so we sent her a link to that of me doing a argument against bail for somebody. And then she heard on the phone me in California, because then I was in Shasta. I let her hear an argument. I turned the phone on so she could hear it. I got permission of the court to do that. Then by the time I came down to SoCal, by then my mother was ill and she wasn't going anywhere. And as her illness got worse, she wouldn't have been able to comprehend what was going anyway. I always say that, one of the great thing in my life is I love surprising my mom. I would show up at times when she would never expect it. Right. And I love the big smile she would get on her face, and it was great. And I remember going to my mom's house. It was probably about a year before she passed away. So the decline was already happening. It was a fairly rapid decline when it hit. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to her for a moment. And then when she said, "Yeah, we could talk about that when my son gets here."
Mm-hmm.
And that was, till the day I died, that was going to be one of the worst moments of my life.
Sure. Well, Eric, and I appreciate you sharing all these stories today. We've got just a couple more minutes.
Sure.
But I want to ask you, which was more hostile or difficult to deal with? Mm-hmm. A jury that did not like your client and you could sense that? A hostile parent of a middle school kid that you gave a bad grade to? A parent who did not appreciate that their child did not play for you, they sat the bench? Or dealing with the crowd somewhere in California when you were wrestling and you just knew the odds were stacked against you? Which was more difficult to deal with?
Oh, by far, without question, it's the parent whose kid didn't play. Mm-hmm. But without question, that is the most hostile. Because the thing about some of the crowds is, first of all, I spent a lot of my career as a babyface. Mm-hmm. So that was good. When I was a heel, there was one time in Brooklyn where we caused a near riot. That was the scariest thing I think I'd seen in a wrestling event. Standing in the ring with my partner thinking we're not going to get out of here alive. Fortunately, we did. But no, the parent was the worst. That was the absolute worst. I would put it number 2, the parent who didn't like the grade. Yeah, far worse, far more hostile.
How dare you mess with my baby?
Oh yeah, I had a parent who got pissed because their kid got an A- instead of an A.
Oh wow.
Yep, was just furious.
God. Well, guys, I have put a link to Eric's firm's website here, but if folks want to find you on YouTube, what's the name of the podcast that you've got?
It's called Wrestling with the Law.
And maybe I misspoke. Is it a podcast or just a YouTube-based series? Tell us a little bit more about it.
Oh, sure. Well, what happens is that I haven't, because I'm so technically inefficient, I haven't figured out fully how to convert everything over to a podcast. So it's a video cast. So what we do, we record it, and then it goes up on we have a YouTube channel we do. We're about to shift all the Wrestling with the Law podcast videos to its own page. But if you look up Eric Anderson Law or Eric D. Anderson Law, pardon me, you'll find us. That's where, you know, a lot of them are. That's also where some of our other legal videos are. As we discuss a few things, like, for example, you know, pretext phone calls, preliminary hearings, where we're trying to explain those procedures. And we're hoping to get, you know, more material out over the next few days. You know, the pandemic was a great chance for us to get some things done, but now business picked up again. So we've had to cut back on a couple of videos, but we're hoping to get a few more done over the next few days.
Very good. Well, I found your YouTube channel and I've also posted it in the comments section. Last thing, if people want to see you from back in your wrestling days, how would they find you on YouTube?
You know, it's funny because a lot of my stuff, you know, predates all the, you know, all these video stuff, but I found some of it out there. You can look up Ebony Blade Wrestling. I think one of my, there's some of the stuff with Gemini Kid. If you see the Gemini Kid who's the skinny white guy, that's not me. But if you look up, you know, Ebony Blade I Quit match, that will, I think that will show up.
Okay, well, very good. Well, Eric, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
It's been my pleasure, Bernard. And really, I want you to know the feeling is mutual because I love seeing your posts. I love getting your newsletter. I think that seeing your focus kind of helps us be better attorneys on this end, both in presentation and in marketing, and, you know, letting that thing come out. If I was the kind of guy who lived in Alabama, I would certainly be telling everybody you need to go see Bernard, and I would weekly be seeing you over a nice glass of well, one of my favorite spirits, and of course a good cigar to perhaps enjoy a little bit of football in the afternoon.
Oh, absolutely. We may have to revisit, come back with another discussion about football, but we'll have to pause that for
Absolutely.
today. But guys, this is Eric Anderson, a buddy of mine in California, and just what a pleasure today. So thank you, Eric, again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And guys, as we always do, we try to bring to you on NOMBERG Law Live on Tuesdays, interesting people in their areas of expertise, and we hit a home run today. I hope you guys have a safe and fun week, and we will catch you another time. Take care.